All right, guys, I've got here with me today a very special guest by the name of Paul Counsel. He's also a fellow multimillionaire and rated one of the best business consultants on LinkedIn in Australia. So, Paul, I've got a couple of questions that I want to ask of you. This is now the age where everybody that's online on TikTok and stuff, they're saying, you got to start making money online. You got to start using AI. You got to start, whatever it is, drop shipping or trading or whatever the hell it is, right? There's always a new fancy thing out there that people are talking about. Now, you've obviously got the years behind you and, seen different trends and fads go in and out and so forth. So the big question is, if somebody was starting from scratch, it might be that they're currently in a job, a 9 to 5. They've been, through years and years of what society has put for them. And they go, I want something different. I don't want to be stuck having to go to work all day, every day, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And they want to have different cash flow streams, but they're not sure where to start. How would one start? What would the advice be? And what do you think around that?
One thing to think about is that the number of ways you can make money are essentially limitless. Okay, so if you just start from that, there are lots of strategies, lots of techniques, lots of different vehicles you could use. So then, if you're going to start from something, you've got to think about, well, okay, what skills do you have already, and what skills are you prepared to learn? Because you can make a lot of money and without having any skills whatsoever, because there are certain things that the market forces will do all of the heavy lifting for you.
And so that's...
Now, I'm not a financial advisor or anything like that, but just imagine if you speak about crypto, and the tokens and all of those sorts of things. Just imagine that you did a lot of research and you said, look, I think this token or this product or this thing that you're looking at has got a really good future. It's really well founded. It's really well thought out. It's decentralized. It's not controlled by
central authority.
Any central authority. And so you might say, well, look, I really believe in the future of this. Now, there's only one thing that you can do. Well, there's really two things. You can either have some or not have some. When you have some, there's nothing you can actually do to that to make the price move up. Market forces have to do that. So your job is to either get some or not. Now, if you've got some money, then you can get some. Now, we say, well, okay, if you've got money, good on you. Now you just got to do the research, and that's where you would start. You would start with things that the market forces are going to move up in price. Now, if you think about the less market forces has the ability to move something in price, the more skill you need at something. So you can be a buyer and a seller of things. You can buy at low price.
Arbitrage or,
Any form of arbitrage. You can, I've always been fascinated with the way that Australians have Christmas. And in Western Australia, for example, lots of people go down to the beach and lots of people go down to the river and they set up their tents and they set up their camps and then they have the Christmas on the beach or the Christmas in the outdoors. But come sort of later, and it's generally really hot, come late afternoon, you sort of think, oh, wouldn't it be nice if somebody walked past here with an ice cream and they would just sell me an ice cream? Or wouldn't it be nice if somebody walked past here with a fresh coffee machine and sold me a coffee machine? And I thought, in other places there would be lots of entrepreneurial people that would be loading up with dry ice and ice creams and doing exactly that. They would actually be arbitraging what they could actually buy the ice cream for and sell it for on a hot day in Christmas where people are just willing to pay any price because it's Christmas. So when you start thinking about those sorts of things, those arbitrages, the difference between what you can actually buy something for and what you can sell it for, are literally everywhere.
It is. I mean, I personally, lived in Indonesia for years and years and years. So, people selling snacks and foods and stuff. And just the other day, I was in China in October, and it was raining after we went to an exhibition for products. And there are people out on the streets just handing out umbrellas, 40 yen, which is like $5 for an umbrella. And it probably cost them like 50 cents, but right place, right time with the right product.
Exactly. I remember one time when I was going to watch a rugby test with Australia and South Africa, and it literally just, the heavens opened up and it literally started pouring. And just out of nowhere came these guys who were selling these little plastic poncho things that you can buy. I would have paid anything for one. And I did. I was able to sit there and comfortably watch I never used that thing ever again. And so again, it's just arbitraging it, right place at right time. So if you think like that, you start thinking entrepreneurially. You can see these arbitrage, and they get more sophisticated because there's always arbitrage opportunities everywhere. So one thing, to answer that question, one thing, you've got some money, now you need the market forces to do the heavy lifting for you. Okay? If you don't have that, you've got to think about what skills do you have and what skills are you prepared to have. When I started off, I didn't have skills, but I was prepared to learn skills. So I went to work for a person that was demolishing houses. I wasn't a builder, I'd had no carpentry skills. And so I figured, look, if I could learn how, to wreck a house, I could see how to actually reverse it.
Yeah.
And they paid me $15 a day.
Which is back then, so.
$15 a day. $15 an hour back then was lousy. $15 a day was like triple. But it wasn't that. I wanted to be in the environment. And what they allowed me to do was anything that they couldn't sell from the building site or the
That's your scrap
construction
to
site,
sell.
I could take it. And I had an old Kingswood, used to throw the wood in there. And from that, I put an extension onto this. Prior to that, I'd started buying a house. So I then learned how to put an extension on, and I built a garage out of all the leftovers. Now with that doubled the price of the house within 6 months.
Yeah.
It wasn't a pretty job,
but
by any stretch of the imagination. But the bank said, "Oh, look, that's a garage now, and that's an extra room." So then they doubled the value of the house. And so then I borrowed the equity, and then I did it more, but I did it in single flats, and then I did it in double flats, and then I did it in full houses. But that was just learning the skill after everything that was going along. And if you're in the right part of the market cycle, the right thing, that's a skill that anybody can actually do.
I think the principle is really, really important. I know some of the viewers that are watching this, they're going to be like, okay, great, I understand I need to learn skills, but what? Because there's so many things. Like, for example, you and I are both people that are in Bitcoin, right? I think, I don't know the exact amount, and you don't need to share it if you don't want to, but I do believe you were in Bitcoin much earlier than most people. And a lot of the viewers will be like, is Bitcoin still good to buy? And there's a whole conversation around that. But the whole point is it still a useful skill to learn? That's a lot of things that people definitely probably would want to confirm. Is renovating still a good strategy? Is drop shipping still a good strategy? It's always is it still this? And then the other question goes, what's the best of them all? Because I just want to focus on one. I just want to, I only have the capacity to learn one skill,
They're really, really, big questions. And the answer really is, it depends. Now, I know that that's a real cop-out answer, but it really does. So if you are asking me specifically, I know a bit about your background. I know that we're actually talking about today, and I don't know when this video is going to be shown. It might be next year. It might be the year after. Who knows when now is when somebody gets to this and we're having a conversation. So if we're talking about today, then we're going to talk about, okay, so what's the economic environment today? And so all of those questions depend on you going through your checklist, okay? Are we in the right part of an economic cycle for that particular vehicle? Are we in the right part of an economic cycle for that opportunity? What's actually coming forward? If I start something now, which might be the right part of the economic cycle, have I got longevity? Or are we sort of at the top of a cycle and we're about to, head over the cliff and head downwards? Well, it really doesn't matter what part of an economic cycle we're in unless you're actually using the wrong vehicle for that part. So we can make money going up, we can make money coming down, we can make money sideways. But again, it requires to specifically say, well, I've got to know you. I've got to be able to ask you questions. I've got to say, oh, have you got this experience? What are your thoughts about that? What are your beliefs about you? All of those sorts of things before I say, well, I think this might be more suitable for you and this might be more suitable for you, given that I'm not a financial advisor. But it's really difficult to answer a blank statement. And even if people do give you a blank statement, it's probably not a good idea to follow them because they don't know you. And so again, they don't know you and they don't know when you're actually getting this piece of information. So it's really important to say, okay, are we in a growth phase? What's happening geopolitically? What's happening politically? What's happening economically? What are the trends? What is trending now? And so we can go online and we can search for what's trending. And so we can put all of these things together into our form guide, for example. And let me give you, does that make sort of sense first?
Yes, it does. To me, it does. I think the topic of cycles, because here's the thing, like in my background with my channels in Indonesia, for example, I have quite the reputation for giving predictions that are extremely accurate in a year's, 2 years' time from when I make them. Now, that skill of being able to predict things actually came from my interactions with yourself from many, many years ago. The ability to sort of take data, because we have a flood of information and disinformation at the same time. And being able to sort of sort through what's BS, what's legit, what's actually going to shift the needle up or down, is it upcycle, downcycle, right? That was definitely a skill that took years to develop, but once it did click through, became extremely valuable, not just in financial decisions that I personally make, but also in the marketing, the ability to put out content that nobody else can put out, and so forth and so forth.
What you're talking about is a lot of things that you have to consider in order to, have a real good go at becoming independently wealthy. And the question that you're sort of implying, but what can I do now?
Exactly.
What can I do now?
And I only ask that question because I know a lot of people that are starting out will have those questions in their mind. And as many times as we try to tell them, you got to get the fundamentals first. You got to have the skills. You got to have
let me go back to my hot donny ice cream.
Yeah.
You don't need any skills.
True. You need the money to get the assets.
You just need to see the opportunity. Does that make sense? Yep. You don't need any skills because it's pretty easy to go to a supermarket and buy whatever price the supermarket is and take it somewhere else and they'll sell it at a higher price. Yep. That's not a skill. That's just that's just doing the work, isn't it? Get a bit of ice and get a bit of this and get a bit of that, okay? And so might have, implications for the local authorities. They might not let you to do that, but I'm just saying, can you see the opportunity? And if you can see the opportunity, you generally don't need skills to begin.
True.
So it's just now being able to see an opportunity and then converting that opportunity into somebody else's convenience. Now, specifically, what will it be for you? Well, now we need to ask more questions, don't we? But if you think about, why do human beings buy anything?
Well,
because it solves a problem for them. I want ice cream on a hot day. I want a cool drink. I want a coffee when I'm out in the middle of the bush. Well, we're not going to find many people out in the middle of the bush willing to buy you a coffee, but we are going to find them on really busy places. When you travel, the first time I travelled to places like Indonesia, I was just amazed the entrepreneurialism of the people who sell stuff on these long lines of traffic.
Yeah.
In Australia, they wouldn't let you do that. You can't even clean anybody's windows. Some cop will come and beat you off. But I just saw that, people standing on the side of the road willing to be somebody's passenger so that they can drive on the freeway at a certain time. That's all just those entrepreneurial things where they're just making it convenient for somebody else. So if you think about how can you see opportunity or how can you use whatever it is that you know now in order to make it convenient for somebody else. And the more convenient that you make it for somebody else, the more willing they are to pay for it.
Now, expanding on that, I would probably interpret that and add on to it and say, well, if that's the case, then the most profitable type of convenience you can supply is convenience to the people that already have money. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Like if you're talking about wealthy, get together with a successful person and help them become more successful. They'll take you wherever they go. Yes. If you help them become more successful, they'll pay you anything. It's a simple formula, complex to get your head around, but get into the energy orbit of somebody who's already successful and help them become more successful. Do things that they don't want to do or haven't even thought about doing. If you're listening to somebody's seminar, for example, and they're just speaking like live, generally they won't have transcripts. Generally they won't have notes. If you actually copy those transcripts into notes and say, look, I've actually done this for you, you can now produce it into a workbook if you like. It's just my gift to you. Do you think they'll want you to do it again? And do you think then you could earn your way into that organisation? You betcha. Because they're already successful. Now you're just helping them become more successful.
That's kind of like the example I remember seeing from one of Andrew Tate's videos, where he talks about how there's a kid that's taking photos of supercars, and then, would you like to give me your email so I can send you the photos? And that was just his way of getting in the orbit of people that were supercar owners in Romania. And he ended up landing himself a 7-figure job out of that as well.
Yep. Opportunity. Can you see the opportunity?
I think that's where the trap is for most people, though, is because, like, for example, when you talk about the Indonesians selling things on the side of the road, it's entrepreneurial. However, the reality is they're never going to be that rich because the convenience they're providing, compared to the time that it takes to provide it's only going to end up being pennies for them over a long period of time.
Yes, but it doesn't diminish the opportunity that they can see. Yes. Now, if you can do that in your context, it's really, okay, now I can latch onto something. Otherwise, you've really now got to say, okay, if I can't go that way, if I can't be sort of entrepreneurial, I've now got to learn a decent set of skills in a particular market medium or a market vehicle in order to do that. But it's even as a salesperson, a salesperson is just making it convenient for people to, buy what it is that they're seeking. And if you know that there will be certain emotions involved and certain intellectual processes involved, and if you can actually get inside the form of those emotions and present them as you being able to offer a better solution than somebody down the road can offer, then you're going to do well. But basically, people say, but I'm not good at sales.
Can't you learn?
Well, see, anybody that says they're not good at sales, they've just sold me on the idea
that they're not good at sales.
They're good at sales. Because if they say, I'm not good at sales, they're selling me on an idea. And if I accept their idea, that means that they have to be good at sales to get me to accept the idea that they're no good.
Well, that's a lovely pattern break, isn't it?
Some people don't understand. But they're really good at selling themselves on not selling themselves, which means they're really good at selling. They're buying their own stories, and selling is just basically a story, a way of actually sharing stories that have a benefit to the user of the story. And if you're selling yourself stories that says you're not good enough and that means you're really good at selling stories.
Yeah, just the ones that end up with bad results.
Exactly. But the idea of selling is, convincing somebody else that this is a benefit. You've convinced yourself that this is a benefit. So you must have the basis of being a good seller. Now, how can we turn that skill externally rather than continually turn it internally?
On the topic of these skills, so selling is a skill. I think I would love to get your opinion on, first of all, you said it depends on when are you watching this, your context, your background, etc. But what's your take on, are there actually any skills, in general skills or specific skills maybe, that it doesn't matter what cycle it is, doesn't matter what era, what age, what anything, those skills are valuable and likely to change somebody's financial results? First is that question. And then the second question is, what about the opposite? What about skills that in 2024, in the early stages of 2024, we can see there's an election coming up in the US, there might be a new president, there's economies going into recession currently in parts of Asia and Europe, right? Are there skills that are useful in this era of time? So it's two sets of questions really in the sense.
They'll basically come together with the same answer. So if you think about, what makes the world go round? Why would anybody buy anything? Who connects the action, buying and solution, for example? Okay. If we look at the elections, what are all the people who want to be elected, what are they actually doing at the moment?
Selling.
They're selling.
They're selling their story of why they make a better president, or
They're selling
whatever it is.
themselves, they're selling ideas, they're selling promises, they're pitching themselves so that you buy them, and by buying them, you vote for them. Okay? So, in answer to your question, is there one skill that'll work in any market? And the answer is yes, and it's selling. So, if you think about through the whole commercial history of commercialization, and we go back 10,000 years, when somebody established, or groups of people, cultures established the ability to generate a surplus of something. So let's say it was grain, or let's say it was a surplus to requirement of cattle or pigs or sheep or whatever, then that actually now begins the whole process of everything that's revolved around selling. It might be account keeping, it might be storage, it might be transactional in nature. But if you want a skill that works in any market, upside, downside, inside, outside, left side, right side, backwards, it'll be selling convenience, or selling a product, selling a solution. In other words, a solution is just another name for convenience. And if you think about that, it doesn't actually matter the market cycle. And so if you listen to, current affairs, if you listen to mainstream media, if you listen to, either that's national or international, at the moment, it's pretty much doing a selling job that is selling fear, and from that fear you might want to do this or this or this. So if you think about who are the financial benefits of this or this or this, it will be the people selling you the fear. And so it doesn't matter the cycle, you just got to see the steps and the dots in between. Now, I don't sell fear, I don't engage in any of that. For me, it's all about optimism, it's about certainty, it's about confidence. But the more you can develop a belief in your ability to learn, and a belief in your ability to change either your thinking behaviour or your feeling behaviour, which is basically a sell job on yourself, the more successful you become in any given market climate.
So we just had to change batteries there on the camera. I kind of ran out there. So Paul, if you don't mind, since the battery did cut off and sort of that thought ended, I wanted to ask you some questions, because I have a VIP group on Telegram that I maintain. And I did a little post on prospect of being able to ask a multimillionaire questions. And some of them came up with some pretty good questions. Do you mind if I just fire over some? So the first one, after explaining to them about, hey, look, I met this guy who's a multimillionaire, he's got a beautiful farm, beautiful horses, and so forth. One of them asked, and this is from Bobby, he said, what do you still desire in your life? I mean, from me, having known you, you're not the flashy kind, you don't have Lamborghinis, you don't have Ferraris, you don't, nothing consumptive or superficial, if that makes sense. So what is it that you desire in your life?
That's a really interesting question. The short answer is nothing. If you think about desire, it's such a low form of energy. Because if you're always desiring, you're coming from a position of not having. So you're coming from a position of lack. And so that's a fairly low level of ability to create. It's a fairly low level of being able to see opportunities. Because if you're coming from a position of desire, the commercial interests of people who have commercial interests will always put in front of you the idea that you lack something. And so that if you had this something,
you'd fill that hole in your heart.
You would fill that void. But that's an unsustainable experience. And so if you can raise your level of awareness, if you can raise your level of consciousness, then you can start, experiencing, states of being that are so much higher than desire. And because desire is energy, it can be measured, so it can be calibrated. And so if you say, would you rather, experience desire, or would you rather experience courage? We know that they would just be two different sort of forms of energy. If you think about desire, if you think about anger, we just know that they're two different forms of energy, so they can be measured. And so there's a state of being that you can experience when you have all of the basic needs of your life basically covered, shelter and food and basically connection and safety and things of that nature. So once you actually get all of those things sorted out and obtained, then there's just this state of being that you experience every single day of your life that doesn't desire anything, but it's always a productive process according to whatever the day brings. So I've got to work on a farm, and so I could, let's say, look, I don't really want to work today, so I'll just go and hire 4 people. I would probably not do that because I actually want the experience of the creation of the work, and I want the experience of the labour in my body. So if is it desire if I want to be in a cool room on a hot day? Well, they're kind of sort of not desires to me. They're just solutions that you find practical, problems you find practical solutions to. So you get to a stage where you have enough of everything that you actually need to then be able to experience happiness. And happiness changes every single day of the week, It's engaging with other people. It's doing things of achievement. It's bonding with your pets, for example. So all of those things. So there's no desire in my awareness anymore.
I certainly feel that way as well. For the first time, as far as I can remember, having I think environment also plays a massive impact on that ability to.
And also the concept of when is enough enough?
Yes.
So
get that 10th pair of shoe, the 27th supercar.
The lady in Philippines had 3,000 pairs of shoes.
Yeah. I think there's a lady like that in WA as well, actually.
More than likely. So I firmly am into there is a certain point where enough is enough, and then you can get on with the things that really matter in life. It's your connections to people and your relationships with, nature, the universe, others, yourself.
I think it's something that, how do you shock somebody to be aware of that, though? Because, it's something that people are so ingrained with.
Well, you don't shock them, because to shock somebody means to lower their consciousness.
Okay, so
not increase
wrong
it.
choice of words then.
Not enhance it.
But to actually wake them up or make them aware of, or okay, so that's how I've been thinking, and now I have the possibility now of being able to change. Or is it something that you just don't you just wait till somebody's ready for it? And
well, you could do either, but by and large, you might have a conversation with somebody, and you might engage them on the results that they're creating in any given particular area of life, whether it's health, whether it's relationships, whether it's money, whether it's business, whether it's marketing, whether it's whatever. And so they will be creating a set of results. Now, if they're not happy with those set of results, who do they think is responsible for those set of results?
Well, if they're aware enough of it,
if they're
themselves.
Blaming external forces, well, they're not really taking responsibility for the results, but they're the ones that are creating the results. And the results can only ever be an indicator of what's actually happening internally for them. And so, if they're willing to take responsibility, now they can actually say, well, if I'm in charge of the results, what do I need to change in me in order to change the results? And so again, it's developing skills and just observing that, they're the one driving the ship, or the ship's been driven for them. You can't
by
really
the
have
spouse,
it both ways.
by the parent, by their workforce, boss.
Basically, it comes from awareness, and from awareness you can change. But all change, happens through, let's say, awareness first, but basically the behaviour has to follow. If you're only doing it intellectually, you've only got half of the equation.
Yes.
And change doesn't happen.
Yes, that's the question that I'm aiming, gearing towards in that line of thinking. I personally have had that experience myself, with a particular person. It's outside the context of a client, where I want this guy to succeed. I want this guy to be financially free. I can intellectually get him to see what it takes to become free, to become wealthy, to become, time-free, money-free, etc. But to actually consistently maintain that momentum, maintain that path.
Yes. I mean, the best example you can be is a role model to something that he aspires to.
Exactly.
Now, he may not act on that yet. And so if you say, well, what's it going to take for anybody to literally act on change, which is behaviour? And so you say, well, okay, what are they primarily motivated by?
It's that away. I think that's away from pain and towards pleasure.
Well, it could be predominantly one or the other. It could be both, but predominantly it's going to be one or the other. And so if you think about most people are primarily motivated by pain. And so they use pleasure to dull the pain. Anybody who's primarily motivated by pleasure, as soon as they recognise that this is not satisfactory, they'll do something about it. So the behaviour is really quick. Somebody that's primarily motivated by pain, the behaviour is very slow. So they'll suffer, or they'll put up with it, or they'll stick with it until they hit their point of enough's enough. And then they'll do something about it. Well, one thing you could do is help people who are primarily motivated by pain to more quickly get to their point of enough's enough. So I call it their pain threshold. Most people have been conditioned into believing that if they've got a high pain threshold,
they're a top achiever.
They're somehow a high achiever, that's somehow noble, that they're somehow heroic.
Yes.
But I think that's part of
the conditioning of the system.
The social conditioning.
Yes.
I have a very low, very low pain threshold. If it's not working, I'm out of here.
Yep.
And so, but that allows me to achieve very, very quickly. Oh, there's a good idea. I'll just go straight for it. I don't have to wait for anything because I'm primarily motivated by things of high achievement because they're pleasurably motivated.
So I want to ask you a second question. This one comes from Suyon. And by the way, I don't think we'll go through all the questions because there's a lot of them, but I hope that someday I can bring you on a live or something and have them ask questions straight direct to you. This one comes from Suyono, and he goes, what do you think is the number one daily habit that has led you to your success? If there is one, because that assumes that there are.
The daily habit of being curious. The daily habit of, it's being curious. And it's curious about everything. And so I'm a person who wants to know things more than have opinions of things or more than have beliefs around things. So I'm curious about how things work. I'm curious about of all of the opportunities on this planet that are available, why don't the majority of people follow those opportunities? So it's curiosity that leads to discovery, that leads to abilities, that leads to, so it's, I want to know what's behind whatever somebody is saying. I don't want to just accept it on face value. Is this true? How do I know? If I don't, and I want to know what both sides of the story are. If I'm being presented with this and somebody's pitching me on this really, really, really good idea, when I was actually starting off, I had a sort of a checklist. For example, there was lots of good ideas that I was learning from books and learning from other presenters and people doing seminars and webinars, and so basically I trained myself to say, okay, look, on one side of the piece of paper are all of these, all of the things that, the good idea is here. I'd look at all of the benefits and I'd look at all of the advantages and all of the positive things that could be gained from whatever was being recommended. Now, once I'd written those out, then I trained myself to look for the exact opposite reasons.
To force a different perspective.
Why won't it work? To force a different perspective. And it wasn't until I actually had both sides of the equation that then I could add up. And what we're not trained to do is to look for all of the reasons why, things could not work out or would not work out, and you've got to research areas that are outside what the popular areas are. So from there, I developed a rule. And the rule is don't design your way into something that you can't design your way out of, given the worst case scenario.
So basically, don't get yourself into unreversible bad decisions.
So, yep, it's good, but what would be the worst case scenario? So now I've got to go and research, well, what would the worst case scenario? And if the worst case scenario were to happen, would I still be advantaged by that? And if the answer was yes, then I went ahead. If the answer was no, then no, I didn't do it.
I think that goes so against what traditional schooling encourages. Because I mean, I'm an example of an ace in school, right? But not one that studied hard, but I just naturally was able to get high grades. And from my own experiences there, I definitely have that experience of feeling proud that I knew an answer that nobody else did, and basically convincing myself that I knew everything. And, you know, I think that followed through in life, especially my first number of years in business, right? That habit of thinking I know everything instead of, as you just described, being able to see things from a truly both sides of the equation perspective. I think what you just tapped into is actually ties quite well with something that I've been reading about, Socratic method. So a philosopher named Socrates, who basically taught his pupils and wrote about it as well, about being able to ask questions to get to the absolute truth of the matter. What you just gave just now, I think, is a very practical method, actually. The writing down all the reasons for, and then what if it doesn't side of the thing. But I also believe it's something that most people won't do in their own decision making.
Look, it doesn't matter how many times I encourage people to think this. It's like, unlike you, I knew that I wasn't clever. I didn't do well at school. I didn't even last long at school. So I've got to give myself some guidelines. Otherwise, whose guidelines am I following? And I don't know whether those guidelines are for my benefit or for their benefit. How do I know? I can see everybody else doing all of these things, but when I look at, are they really enjoying a quality of life? And the answer is generally no for people. If they work really, really hard for all their lives, are they suddenly, able to do these things in retirement? The answer is generally no. And so, hang on. If we only look at our older people, they're indicators as to what the whole system has been indicating. And so, I don't want to end up where they end up. So I've got to go and find something else. I didn't understand any of this. I just knew that these people are showing you, they're signposts
of what's coming in
of what's coming, if you can only read the signposts.
I find that thought quite interesting from my perspective, being much younger, because I know a lot of the people on social media posting, the older generation had it easy. You could still buy a house for, working a year or 2 or 3 years and be able to buy a house. Whereas today you have to work 30 years to, pay off a mortgage that costs 3 times the amount of the actual house. In your experience, in your younger days, was it also the same? Did you feel your parents and your older generation had it easier? Or is it same, just different generation?
Look, it's really... It's an easy thing to say, looking backwards, but every generation have their own challenges. Every single year of their existence, and it was the challenges they have according to what's happening economically, what's happening geopolitically, what's happening socially, what's happening, and all of these sorts of things. So it's easy to, relatively speaking, look back and apply a set of values that they have now to, something that was way back then. It's not a useful comparison. So every generation, and it doesn't matter who they were, there were the people that were the entrepreneurs and they could see the opportunities and take advantage of the opportunities. And then there were the people that could never see the opportunities and they just followed the exchange of time and labour model all of their life. Nothing's changed. Literally nothing has changed. We've got, the quality of life we have now is far greater than the quality of life that any generation had previous to them. Even the kings and queens of not so long ago. We've got such modern stuff at our, modern conveniences. So it's not a useful comparison. What would be a greater comparison is how do I engage in and advantage myself by the opportunities that exist now, irrespective of what ratios are and how long it might take you to buy a house and all of that sort of stuff. If you want a house, there are ways to buy it. If you don't want a house, there's ways to complain about it, Or if you do want a house and you're not prepared to do anything, then there are greater ways to complain about it. But every single generation that ever succeeded at a higher level all saw opportunities, and then they developed the necessary skills to advantage themselves in those opportunities, and that exists now. Nothing has changed because human behavior has not changed. Human nature has not changed. Human need has not changed. Human psychology has not changed. At the basic level, we are still humans. We are still driven by our needs. We want our needs met by any way we can get them met. And if somebody else can meet my needs more than I can meet my needs, then that's convenience for me. I'll buy it.
This entire interview, I've actually been asking you questions anticipating how the majority of viewers might ask, right? And what I find extremely interesting is that in every single question I ask, I reword it in different ways. But at the end of the day, they point to the same thing, and your answers to these questions all reflect the exact principles that you were saying at the very beginning of this podcast, having that curiosity, having the ability to see opportunity, just to see it, And I really thank you for giving those insights.
One of the things that I've had the great honour in experiencing in my lifetime is that I had the opportunity to spend some time with Indigenous populations out in the middle of Australia. And I was invited to go some of their daily activities, which included hunting for food. And so I was always amazed, let's say, an Aboriginal elder's ability to track creatures or animals through whatever the terrain was. And I was always amazed at my inability to see what they were seeing, even though my eyes were looking at the same as their eyes were looking at. I couldn't interpret until they pointed out something to me that wasn't in my perceptual awareness. And when they pointed it out, could I now see that bit of information over there, and then over there, and over there? And yes, because my eyes started to learn, my brain started to learn, but it was only when that person was sharing information with me. Nothing has changed. Why do most people today not be able to see the opportunities? Well, because they've never been taught to see the opportunities. And so it's not a difficult process, but you've got to be among people who do see opportunities in order for you to be able to learn to how their eyes are perceiving the opportunity. And then you say, that makes perfect sense. And the more that you're in that environment, the more skilled you become at reading those signs, and the more you become entrepreneurial based, especially if you're curious and you've got this intuitive drive to get better and better and better and better and better.
I certainly hope that the people watching this video have had their eyes opened and sort of had that door unlocked for them to stay curious and keep asking questions and looking for more answers to those questions that they get daily. I think this is a good sign off for this particular podcast. It was a pleasure having you, and I thank you so much for sharing.
My pleasure.
Sharing your thoughts, and would love to have you again some other time.
My pleasure.
See you next time.